Hi, my name is Erik Won. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for Wave Neuroscience. I'm very excited to be here with all of you today to talk about personalized precision guided medicine, brain care, and brain health. I hope you'll enjoy it. Thank you for listening in.
3, 2, 1.
Thank you.
This is the part of the podcast where I pretend like we haven't already been talking for 15 minutes, but just roll right into it. My question right out of the gate is, I don't know if it's a question or just a concept of awareness. I feel like neuroscience and tapping into what is going on up here in the brain is the cool thing to do right now. Maybe it's just what I'm learning more about or what it seems like the human performance world, health, fitness, wellness is kind of gravitating towards. But is brain health trending right now, or is this something that is just kind of making a resurgence?
Well, first, I want to say it's a real privilege to be here. Thank you for taking the time.
Very welcome.
I do believe, I don't know if trending is the right word, but we certainly hope so. And, one of our missions as an organization is to democratize brain care and improve knowledge of brain health to empower people to live their best lives. And so that's really fundamentally one of our goals and objectives. And so if that is the intuition that you're sensing, I hope that's the case. And, for your listeners, we hope we're a part of that conversation, but there's so many other really powerful resources out there. I hope people are getting engaged in this and learning because I don't know that there's been a time in history where there's been more reason for hope and more innovation occurring in this space. And it's a pretty exciting time to see what's unfolding.
And you've been in the health and human performance, the person, the human world for a long time. You started off looking at the MD route, if memory serves, and then kind of went into neuroscience. So what was so intriguing about the brain that caused you to quite literally change your path for life?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, for my journey, I was I was a Navy flight surgeon many, many years ago.
Go Army, be Navy. Had to say it.
Yeah, we're all at the end of the day, we're all on the same team. But my unit had the misfortune of having some of the first casualties of Operation Iraqi Freedom. And I didn't appreciate at the time how profoundly that would change my life. But almost immediately, my mission became helping out these 150 men and women who are serving and struggling with the loss of, their brothers. And really for the next decade, we were searching for anything that could help, whether, the signature injuries of this conflict were concussions, post-traumatic stress. And, there are tools available, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy, in some cases, antidepressants. But what Wave Neuroscience had innovated is a non-pharmaceutical option. And that was really interesting to me. That we could impart these changes in brain activity that could optimize function and help people along their healing journey. And it was really a conversation I had at Special Operations Command headquarters with a 2-star general who sort of pulled me aside and said,
"It's always fun, right?"
Yeah. Well, this guy, he's sort of out of central casting. He looked like he could kill me with his left pinky toe and probably could. But, he shared with me, "I love what you're doing for our guys. Is it possible you could help them be better on target?" And he used the term prehabilitation and prehabilitation, helping people before they really became broken or sick or started struggling.
That word. Yeah.
Yeah. And, the honest answer at that time was, I don't know, but I'm happy to work shoulder to shoulder with you to gather data and see what we can do to help. And so we're now 4 years down the road, and it turns out we can help in some dimensions even I wasn't anticipating. And so,
like what, for example? Maybe not to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but
yeah. Well, so heart rate variability is not something the medical community was super familiar with. This is a human performance athletic term. And so when people talked about HRV, and on the way in, we were talking about these Whoop devices and Oura rings, I had to try to get really smart really fast. And so I was talking to subject matter experts about this. And For those in the audience who may not know, heart rate variability is a proxy for autonomic tone. And so there's the sympathetic system, which is fight or flight, and there's the parasympathetic system, which is rest and digest. And so just as an example, PTSD is thought to be sympathetic overdrive, where you're constantly in fight or flight mode and you can't get into this rest and relaxation mode. But we were curious, what can we do for HRV? It turns out this is thought to be a measure that can assess emotional resilience, for example, of keen interest, not just for elite operators, but elite athletes, chief executive officers, anybody who's interested in performance.
High performance overall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Will be interested in HRV. So we had actually procured about a dozen of these Whoop bands to assess people's sleep, because we knew what we were doing was really helping people get higher quality sleep, which is its own conversation, fundamental to recovery and restoration of function. And so over a month, we were able to see very significant changes in sleep architecture. And we can get into that a bit down the road. But we got this unsolicited call from a representative at Whoop saying, hey, what are you guys doing? We're seeing these big changes in HRV. Sometimes,
that's a cool call to get.
Yeah, 30 to 40% shifts in HRV in a month. And, it's embarrassing to say now. It's like, well, let's talk about that. I'm not exactly sure what that might mean. And so we had many conversations, and it turned out fairly reliably we were helping people with their HRV, which made sense because we were seeing clinical improvements in people's PTSD symptoms and concussion symptoms. So much so that Special Operations Command funded a clinical trial, and we're about a third of the way through that. We're still blinded to the data, but we're encouraged by what we're seeing in the aggregate.
Yeah.
And so in short, we've wanted to assess this and pressure test it in many different ways. We used another tool. It's a tablet-based neurocognitive assessment called Braincare. And we were able to see improvements in what's called executive function, which is our ability to organize thoughts and process information. And through these tablet-based exercises, we were able to see sometimes very significant improvements in reaction time.
Which is huge for high performers, military. I mean, a millisecond can mean life or death or making a right or wrong decision.
Yeah. Well, and so we can measure this in a laboratory setting with what's called Stroop testing. And so you give somebody a task, like the word blue will pop up on the screen, you have to type blue, and the word red will pop up on the screen, you have to type red. We call this linear processing speed. And we saw approximately 30% improvements in this linear processing time. Wow. And then you can add a complex task where the color blue will pop up, but you have to type red. And so you have to think
the word versus the color kind of thing. Yeah, I've seen these tests.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we saw roughly a 22% improvement in those reaction times, which is all good and well, but how does that translate onto the battlefield or the sports field? And we're seeing that this can have very meaningful changes in terms of marksmanship scores. We have a professor at USC who's shared with us that this seems to help with contrast enhancement with our visual cortex. And then we had a younger race car driver. I don't follow race car driving, but he was an F4 race car driver when he started. And then a month later, he set a course record and then qualified to be an F3 race car driver.
In 1 month?
In 1 month.
Wow.
And so I don't know what that means, but there was a lot of excitement around that. And so I think we're just starting to pull back the curtain on what's possible with neuro optimization, neuro wellness. And so, whereas the mission I set out upon, my oath is to save lives and stamp out disease and to help people on a clinical and medical basis. But the market has been telling us there is a demand and need in the human performance arena. And I think the alignment there is part of our goal and objective is to also reframe the conversation around, for better or worse, we still live in a society where there may be some stigma around mental illness. And rather than apply labels, the medical convention may be major depressive disorder or bipolar disorder or anxiety. And what we're trying to do is we're just getting a 10-minute brain image, very easy to get, and we can find neurons that may be misfiring. And
really,
just that conversation, many of our veterans have said, my healing journey started when I saw that there was something going on, because
it makes it more tangible. Like, here's the thing that needs to be fixed.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
And it's a disarming conversation to have, because now it's not some label. It's just, this cluster of neurons maybe sabotaging you just a little bit. Let's work together to move those in the right direction. And you might notice that you have elevated mood, that you can connect dots a little bit better. And in some cases, for athletes and operators, function better in your profession. And so for us, that's a happy byproduct.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's been an interesting road. I was not anticipating this when we started, but it's been exciting to have these conversations and to see where we might be able to go with this.
What about, for lack of a better term, everyday Joe, everyday Jane? Why should they be concerned about the performance levels of their brain? Why should brain health? Like, I'm not trying to run a 440. I'm not trying to, maybe I'm not a C-level executive, but I am someone who's just, I want to feel my best. I want to just, feel my best. Like, why should I care about this?
Yeah. The saying that's evolved is you don't have to be sick to want to be well or to be better. Everyone deserves to feel their best. And so if we can be a small part of that, that's really a goal that's worthy of our lifetime of effort, right? And so this has been very invigorating, and in many cases inspiring to see these stories come together for people. We all struggle in our own little way, whether it's a relationship with our child, or maybe a toxic relationship at work. Who knows how it might be, but if we have just a little bit more reserve and patience and ability to manage that type of situation, not just on the individual level, but if we start thinking about the family and then the community and then a population type scale, how much better would this world be if we could, if we were functioning better from a neurocognitive perspective? And so the term you'll hear us say a lot is democratizing brain health, democratizing brain care. And part of this is just understanding what's happening and then working together to optimize, ourselves, whether it's through better nutrition and exercise, exercising smarter, meditation, mindfulness, breathing. All of these things holistically are helping people. And to now have a biomarker that we can track over time, we're really good at measuring things from the neck down.
Yeah.
And we're not, whether it's, blood biomarkers or 40 times or bench press, in the human performance arena, people have gotten very sophisticated at measuring everything. And
I'm one of them. It's, I feel like every year I'm adding something new to my wrist or something to measure these things.
Well, that's, I think, been a really exciting area of innovation, is these wearables. And we're currently interested in continuous glucose monitors. That's an area.
I use one from time to time. Levels. Continuous glucose monitor. I've gone through about 3 cycles now this year.
Yeah. It's fascinating. So we live in this very digital, quantitative environment. But from the neck up, I think we've fallen a little bit short. And our goal, we've spent literally millions of dollars translating this very complex neuroscience that's been innovated in elite academic institutions and laboratories. And typically you're getting 40 to 50 page reports designed for PhD scientists and doctors. Wow. And we've worked very hard to distill this into a 1 to 2 page. I can understand this format.
Thank you.
Because really we have to start having these conversations. And you'd asked at the ground level, why should an average Joe or Jill be interested in this? There's really exciting emerging evidence illuminating some of the reasons for cognitive decline. And one of the most important causative mechanisms, and the weight of the evidence seems to be leading to this, is that poor quality sleep, and not just 1 or 2 nights. We're talking about years or decades of being underslept can lead to a lot of these symptoms.
Oh, please talk more. Sleep is my favorite thing in the world. It's been the top of my wellness pyramid for a couple of years, and I can sing its praises all day long, but I got the expert here to talk about it now.
Yeah, well, we could talk for hours about this, but just to shine a light on some of the science that's been emerging is many of us are familiar with these two proteins associated with Alzheimer's dementia called tau proteins and beta amyloid proteins. And these are actually a natural part of our biology. They exist for a reason. But it turns out these accumulate fairly profoundly when you're not getting good sleep.
Really?
Yeah. And the discovery was there's a neuroimaging technology called two-photon microscopy, where you can in real time observe at a cellular level how brain tissue is functioning. And what we learned is during the very deep stages of sleep, stage 3 sleep, and even REM sleep, these glial cells shrink in size and they create wide channels with which cerebral spinal fluid can move through. And
talking about the glymphatic system, right?
The glymphatic system, exactly. And we can wash away the debris of oxidative stress throughout the day, beta amyloid and these tau proteins. But there's this beautiful study done out of Washington University where they lumbar punctured people after just one night of poor sleep. And they saw dramatic increases in the amount of tau protein and beta amyloid.
In just one night?
Just one night.
Of lowered sleep quantity and or quality?
Quality. Yeah,
okay.
they're particularly sleep depriving them of stage 3 deep restorative sleep, slow wave sleep. That's important because it sort of lays a foundation for, well, what happens if you string together months or years of poor sleep? And to put some people's minds at ease, having one night of bad sleep doesn't mean that you're doomed or anything like that, because these proteins need to phosphorylate and harden to become really a problem. But we're starting to pull back the curtain on the underlying biological mechanisms that lead to these issues. And it highlights the critical importance of getting good quality sleep. And so this is something we know we're doing uniquely well, is not necessarily helping with sleep latency, which is what sleep latency refers to, how quickly you can fall asleep. And so the hypnotic medications like Ambien or Sonata, they do a wonderful job of helping people to fall asleep, but they seem to not be doing a great job of helping people to get the deep, slow wave stages of sleep.
To stay in that restorative sleep cycles.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
And it appears that neuromodulation is helping people to get more of that slow wave, deep sleep. But before we go too far down that road, it's probably worth mentioning this discovery of blue light, the importance of blue light and honoring our circadian rhythm. And I think you've covered this in some of your other podcasts.
A few, yeah. We've had some light experts on talking specifically about circadian rhythm, grounding, artificial natural light, and yeah, particularly blue light as well. But please, it's been a minute. So what do you have for us?
Yeah, it's really, there are 2 Nobel Prizes awarded for the discovery of blue light. It's 450 to 500 nanometer light, and it's most intense early in the morning. We call it low angle solar light.
I've heard that. Yes.
Yeah, when the sun rises, there's a lot of blue light. And if we think back to our ancestors, this was the first biological cue in our circadian rhythm to wake up and to start our day. And so we have photoreceptors in our eyes called melanopsin. They're neurons that send a signal to another part of our brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And that is an inhibitory neuron that tells another area of the brain secrete melatonin about 14 hours later. So there's 2 sort of lessons that we gain from this. The first is we have to honor our biology. And when we wake up, we sort of have to get outside and get that natural blue light, something very few of us do. And I'm as guilty as anyone. We think about our daily routine. At least for me, I used to wake up, I'd shower, I'd go into my garage, and I'm immediately behind glass in my car. And then I drive to work and I walk 10 feet into my office. So I cumulatively get about a 10-second pulse of blue light. And we actually need about 30 minutes to an hour. Glass, unfortunately, significantly lowers the amount of blue light exposure you get. And so in our society, whether it's behind, an office window or our car window, we're not outside enough. And so perhaps one of the take-home messages is 30 minutes to an hour a day, first thing in the morning, whether it's eating a bowl of cereal outside, taking the dog for a walk in the park. We set ourselves up for success by being outside and getting natural blue light. And then 14 hours later, when we get this biological cue and a spike of melatonin, you have to listen to your body.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do because we're, binge watching Netflix or we're on our phones.
In bed, hitting the talk, as my wife calls it. Just aimlessly scrolling on TikTok or something.
Yeah. But our body does tell us, that the first sign of nighttime somnolence and fatigue when you're yawning, you've got about a 30-minute window when your melatonin is spiking to get into bed and to sleep. And when we do that, we very quickly get into deep restorative sleep. And so avoiding blue light and stimulation at night, stimulants such as nicotine or energy drinks, really after about 1 or 2 p.m., we should stop. Caffeine as we're drinking coffee.
Yeah, we'll cut off after this interview.
We're on the border. But yeah, this is, I think, fundamental to setting ourselves up for good sleep. And if that's all people left this recording with today, we'll have done a good job because, we are a society that's very underslept.
Yes. Yeah. And quantity and quality are not the same thing when it comes to your sleep health. It's a respect and a prioritization of both that I have found has really helped me the most in everything I'm trying to do in life. And I'm so glad you hit home on the fact that a good night's sleep, contributing to good brain health, actually starts a lot sooner than we think. I mean, there are certain things you can do, and I've talked ad nauseum about evening rituals, bedtime rituals, things to help at night. But I actually had never heard that specificity about 14 hours of the morning routine. Like, it actually triggers. We can measure when this trigger happens to, like, if you're going to basically have a good night's sleep or not 14 hours prior, what are you doing in the morning? That's really profound. So I'm one of those guys, first, probably 30 minutes of the day, I'm out getting sunshine, walking the dog. Anytime I'm traveling, I'm doing that. Maybe not the dog, but also like grounding, like getting out barefoot and just like reconnecting, because there's so much natural benefits that are just waiting for us if we just step out into them, literally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have no affiliation with these people, but some of the preeminent sleep researchers, Matthew Walker, Andrew Huberman is a specialist on vision. They talk at length about how to optimize sleep. And so I'm glad that there is now a spotlight on this, and hopefully there's more awareness of the critical importance of sleep. And
I think we have a mutual friend, Luisa Nicola. I actually was on the way over here. Her and I were talking about some podcast stuff, and I was texting her. I was like, "Oh, I'm on my way to the studio. I want to see this guy, Wave Neuro, blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "No shit." I'm like, right. Like, I think I was just talking to him or something popped up on Instagram. She was on the show, I think, like last year, and we dove deep into sleep health as well, all around through the lens of neuroscience as well. So
she's a brilliant woman.
She is. And the work that she does with sleep, like, she's one of my favorite people to like consume content and to look at and read. I mean, she's legit. She's legit. I want to take it back, if we could, to you were bringing up this term biomarker. And if I'm understanding you correctly, it sounds like neuroscience, brain health, and all the contributions it has there for mental health and physiological health is like a new biomarker. And everything that you're doing with Wave Neuro in particular is a new way to measure that. So that really piqued my attention. Is neurology, is brain health, is this a new biomarker that we are stepping into in terms of, I can do a Garmin, a Fitbit, a Apple Watch, I can do a Whoop. Is brain health becoming the new biomarker?
We hope so. And so there's so many different ways to measure electrophysiologic health. And so EEG, the electroencephalogram, is an electrophysiologic brain map, much in the same way in EKG, an electrocardiogram is an electrophysiologic picture of the heart. We can get these pretty sophisticated images of the brain really in about 10 or 15 minutes. And there's been so much innovation here. Traditionally, we've gotten what are called wet lead EEGs, where you get a bunch of goop in your hair, and that's about 20 to 30 minutes to set up and maybe an hour image. And we're working now with dry lead EEG, which is, it's Bluetooth technology. We can literally get these at Starbucks. It's a wireless technology. We put it on the head. It's about 5 minutes to set up and a 10-minute data capture. And we can get pretty good quality signal with this. And so there's surface electrodes that are assessing overall brain function. And there's a number of different metrics that we're tracking. And so distilling some really complex neuroscience where, other folks might be talking about eigenvector centrality and phase lag coherence. And these are terms that are very difficult to explain to a typical consumer. And so we've really sort of zoned in on 4 separate measures. One we're just calling the brain score.
Oh,
and so it's a simple,
sounds great. Yeah.
0 to 100 number. It's a multifactorial analysis based on a number of algorithms that's giving you a single score that's fairly robust and repeatable over time. And so if you wanted to get a baseline today and then see how am I doing 3 months from now when I implement a regimen of transcendental meditation and I have a clean diet, we should be able to track that over time and see any kind of changes that are occurring.
Sure, yeah.
And so that's been a very lengthy effort. We've had collaborations with people from Texas A&M and BrainScope and a number of different organizations. It's been a wonderful evolution of thought leaders coming together and trying to develop a repeatable measure. The second measure is something we call alpha frequency. And in any given time, there are really 4 main bands with which your brain might operate. And from fast to slow, it's beta, alpha, theta, and delta. And theta and delta are where you live when you're sleeping or when you're about to go to sleep. Alpha is your wakeful state. And beta can be also in your wakeful state. It tends to be more when you're engaged and active and hyper-focused. But alpha is a number of keen interests. And what this is telling us is how many times per second you're encoding information.
Really?
Yeah. So typically, the healthy range is going to be 8 to 13 times per second, or we measure these in hertz. And so in a scenario, let's say you as a pretty elite athlete are a 12.2 hertz brain, and I might be a 9.3 hertz brain. There's no perfect brain. And so I know there's some people who are like, oh, I want to be this, I want to be that. We're such a diverse species. Like I want to sort of disavow this notion that, I want the perfect brain. We all have unique characteristics and features that make us who we are. But the alpha frequency is one of those dimensions. And faster frequencies have certain advantages. And there's this wonderful study done at a University of Wisconsin where they flash a strobe light. And these flashes were about 20 milliseconds apart. And some people saw 2 flashes and some people saw 1 flash. And it turned out the differentiator was if you were 10 hertz or faster, you could see 2 flashes.
Your brain was interpreting that data that fast.
Exactly. You had a faster frame rate.
There we go.
And if you were 10 hertz or slower.
All my creatives are nodding their head now listening. yeah, we get that. Yeah.
So if you're 10 hertz or slower, you see 1 flash. And so you can imagine, we've all heard elite baseball players say, when I'm in the zone, when I have flow, I can see the stitches on a baseball. They're probably very fast processors.
Wow.
And so we've seen among our super elite athletes and our operators, very many of those are 10 hertz or faster. But the creative types tend to be a little bit slower. And so there's pros and cons with every one of these. Really fast brains, in many cases, one of the characteristics can be they tend to be a little more impulsive. And so your mind may wander to, I'm not going to mention names, but there's some wide receivers who, become very impulsive. They're very high character. They're funny on the camera. You
could say names. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not a sports guy. So
yeah, but yeah. So any of these, alpha frequency gives us some very useful information because it tells us what your dominant wavelength is and where you like to live. And so we like to frame a range. So if you were a 12.2 hertz brain, we might say your ideal range would be 11.8 to 12.6.
So here's like your range for optimal performance, daily living, and kind of just where you should aim for, basically.
That's exactly right. And through these images, you can also identify areas that might be firing too fast or too slow. And that tells us a lot about how you might be experiencing your world. So let's say in a scenario, you took a hit to the front of the brain, whether it's through football or, in a car accident, and we see a cluster of neurons that might be firing at 2 hertz. If the rest of your brain is at 12, we can very comfortably say, that's an abnormality for you. That's a disruption in function. And because the prefrontal cortex is executive function, you may lack motivation, feel lethargic, not want to get out of bed. And importantly, that gives us also a goal to let's work to improve that. And there's different things that we can do. And in a separate scenario, let's say I fall off a ladder and I hit the back of my head, visual cortex, maybe firing, let's say at 25 hertz. So I'm scanning my environment 25 times per second, but I can only process it 12.2 times per second. There's this information overload that may cause me to experience anxiety.
Yeah, we've all seen that in the movies when a blast happens and ringing's going on and things are spinning and it's just like everything is, you're like hyper alert basically, but it's too much. You can't quite interpret what's going on and therefore you can't act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I think just that information, I think is useful for people to know and to understand, oh, this is why am I experiencing my world this way? And importantly, we can work together to sort of target those areas and figure out ways to improve them. We're employing a separate technology, one that is physician monitored called transcranial magnetic stimulation. This alpha rhythm that we detect and some of the disruptions that we see, that represents this third biomarker of disruption that we're trying to assess and measure and quantify. And our goal is to make that really easy for people to understand and engage with so we can have some important conversations. And there's no label that's applied. We're not saying major depression or bipolar disorder or PTSD. It's just you got some neurons that are misfiring a little bit. Let's work together to tune that up. And there's a number of ways to do that. We can be completely holistic. We can use nutritional supplements if there are areas that may be deficient. We can engage meditation, breathing, mindfulness. But we have two what we call neuromodulation devices. One that is FDA cleared called transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's done in a doctor's office. And this is not like electrical shock therapy. It's not high wattage, high voltage stuff. It's a very comfortable procedure to get. You just sit in a lounge chair and they place this coil in an area and you feel some gentle tapping.
Okay.
And these are electromagnetic pulses. And the magnet threw me off at first because it conjures images of little trinkets or ear. It's not that. This is actually a 1.8 Tesla MRI grade magnetic coil that is delivering energy. And the reason we have to use a magnet, the first order principles of physics are that magnets can deliver energy across a solid barrier. And because we have a 1 centimeter piece of skull,
hopefully we got that nice barrier there.
This is able to induce evoked potentials in neurons non-invasively. So there's no scalpel, there's no anesthesia. It's virtually painless. And we're stimulating areas of the brain to either fire faster or we're trying to disinhibit them to fire a little bit slower. And when we do that, we now got this precision guidance tool with which to geo-navigate to different areas of the brain and to give it the friendly nudge it needs to get back to the frequency it needs.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
One thing you're kind of bringing up for me that I would like to address is this concept of energy. You're using energy to measure energy. You're using these devices to measure our natural energy, the wavelengths, the frequencies of our brains. Can you talk a little bit about the energy that we emit as humans? What is it? Why do we have it? What are the different ways that we use to measure it? Just because maybe it's the LA woo in me coming out, but there's a lot of energy talk. And when we say energy, I think there's some people that look at the more quantifiable. I understand it. Here's certain things we can measure. And then others where it's a little bit more maybe like the spiritual energy. But we as human beings, alive human beings, we have energy that flows through us. What is that? What's that about? And not the LA woo way.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. I think it's uncontroversial to say, we have two electrical organs. There's no dispute. The brain functions largely on, it's an electrophysiologic organ. It propagates impulses from different areas of the brain. And it communicates, these neurons communicate through ion channels and synapses. And all of that's been pretty well studied. Even at the cellular level, we do what are called single patch clamp studies where we can see changes in mRNA expression and neurotransmitters. And these are all just fascinating areas of exploration, discovery, and even though our biology hasn't changed dramatically over the years, we're still illuminating new things about the way this mysterious organ functions, and that's part of, I think, what's really exciting about the field. Interestingly, the heart's an electrical organ too, and we understand that we call aberrations of this arrhythmia when the heart may beat abnormally, and that's largely due to electrical abnormalities that can be, in some cases, fixed by these paddles, these automatic external defibrillators. Sometimes we'll ablate an area that may be discharging at times that are not convenient. But the whole, central nervous system, peripheral nervous system is based on electrical activity. And then this other, you refer to as LA woo-woo.
The spiritual energy. Yeah.
The spiritual energy. I can't speak as thoughtfully about, but it's interesting.
But energy is energy.
Energy is energy. And we all sort of, I think intuitively we know we give off a certain energy around each other. And there's actually some interesting studies. I'm thinking of the Tibetan monks where if everyone is doing one of these mantras or chants together, there is synchronization of actual brain activity.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's so much exploration and these synergies we have between each other and with each other. I think we're just starting to scratch the surface. So while some of this may be woo-woo, I think that there is some real science behind how we all sort of interconnect. And it's interesting. I think of a quote. There's a saying that the quality of our life, the fundamental element that determines our quality of life is the people we choose to surround ourselves with and the conversations that we're privileged to have with those people. And I think that's fundamental to, I think, our overall wellness, number one.
Absolutely.
But the type of energy we choose to surround ourselves with, we have free license to architect that and to be around people who are either going to build us up or break us down. And so when you talk about this kind of energy, people can call it all sorts of different types of things, making smart choices. But yeah, I think it's an important part of this discussion if we're talking about performance and being the best versions of ourselves, who we surround ourselves with, the type of energy we put out every day. Those are important choices that we make.
Taking inventory of our energy before we even get to the part of what energy might putting out. That's like the whole concept. A lot of the concepts we've been talking about, just in my head, I just get all these other analogies of, of course, this makes sense when we're in the gym. This makes sense when we're in the kitchen. This makes sense in so many other areas of our health, our lives, and our wellness. It just starts first with taking inventory of what's going on so that we can make a better choice when it comes to what we want to change, which leads me to where I want to go next. Knowing is a lot of times, especially when it comes to biomarkers, getting blood tests at the doctor, knowing something about ourselves, our trauma, our bodies, like we put off because we're afraid of what might be. I was telling you earlier, I use off and on continuous glucose monitor. Well, I get asked, Chase, are you diabetic? Are you becoming a diabetic? Like, do you have blood sugar problems? No, but I do have diabetics in my family. And as someone who is aware of that, I want to just stay ahead of it. So I first try to arm myself with the knowledge of where am I today, the knowledge of my past, of, genetics, my family, my history, anything that might predispose me to have to work harder on some things, or maybe I got an edge on some things. When it comes to brain health, what if anything might be the fearful part for somebody? Is there something that we could measure that could, like, hey, this is a big red flag for your brain, for your longevity, for maybe even life itself?
Well, let's start with none of us are perfect. We don't have perfect brains. And so I hope nobody's afraid of what they might see in one of these images. It's a biological metric that's giving us an assessment of where we might be. And are we going to find something horrible there? That's exquisitely rare.
Okay.
It's just we're so diverse. I think at most what you're seeing is there are certain features that we see here that may be unique to you. And this might be why you're experiencing the world this way. And if there are elements in your life that may be not optimal, whether it's disrupted sleep, excess use of alcohol or other types of drugs or something like that, that might be an important conversation to have as well. And so it's a data point. By no means is it dispositive. Nobody is going to walk out of one of these conversations hopefully thinking, gosh, I'm a bad person or I'm flawed or anything like that. My brain is really far from perfect. But there are some things about it that are unique that I can be fairly proud of. I'll just share one analogy that I had all my children get EEGs, and my son, we could see that he was a little bit delayed in his manual dexterity. And first of all, I couldn't believe that the neuroscientist could see. So this is when he was 8 or 9 years old. Okay. And my wife and myself, and he was getting piano lessons and really just it wasn't taking very well. And it kind of gave us permission to say, he's going to develop at his own pace and we don't have to hammer him about not being able to play the piano. And his penmanship caught up, and he's turned into a wonderful young man. But that was an interesting feature to see that it kind of gave us permission to parent in a little bit of a different way. And so, you were asking, is there something to be afraid of? I would say the exact opposite. It only informs us about what is unique about us and how we might operate in the world. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. And just quite literally that last little section you were saying there reminded me, honestly, of pretty much every reason why, or the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing here today, of why taking care of my health, my wellness was so important. Beyond my own injuries and things I experienced, it was the emotional side, fear. Like, I only really started caring about my health, when I was afraid that the disease that took my father was also going to take me. The disease that I saw my grandfather and aunt and I believe great-grandfather deal with, diabetes. When I became fearful of seeing my family, my loved ones, not only just have something, but then it affect the quality of their life. And for some of them, my father, quite literally taking their life. And so fear was my big catalyst. But I love what you said there. And I really want to drive this point home for the listener, is that get on the other side of fear. Don't wait until you see something in your life go wrong or in a loved one's life go wrong before you actually take action to measure something, to hopefully prevent something. Is that to make the choice, like you were saying, like you and your wife, to give yourself permission to just act and think in a different way, to go about how you're going to parent your child, even make your own decisions for your own life. My big goal here is for people to recognize that knowledge truly is power, and just getting your physical every year. Just waking up in the morning and scanning head to toe. How do I feel? Where do I feel good? Where do I feel not so good? Using different wearables, like we see here today, or what you're talking about at Wave Neuro. Like, this is truly, I think, one of the greatest gifts we have to be alive right now, is we can measure things and get ahead of fear to change and optimize our lives.
Absolutely. And you touch on some really important points, and I hope anyone who goes in to a Braincare Performance Center or a brain treatment center would feel a very welcoming and warm environment, because really there is no judgment. We're all in different places on our healing journey. And if I could sort of ask a question, what helped you to get over this fear? Was it just I'm going to break through this? Or, what are some of the events that led you to sort of that stage?
Well, there was one big significant event. Like I said, the diseases that ran in my family was kind of what brought me, in to test certain things. But I guess to really answer your question, it was when I kind of realized I was taking my health and my wellness, my life for granted. Specifically the injuries I sustained during active duty that led me to be, were career ending, led me to be medically retired. And I thought, oh, it's my early 20s. I'm active duty Army. I'm kicking ass every day. I'm doing all these things. Like I'm kind of invincible. I'm eating well. I can ruck 20 miles. I can do whatever. But then just in a second, like that was snapped up and taken away from me. So no matter how well I thought I was performing, no matter how invincible I thought I was consciously or subconsciously, I very quickly was shown the reality that anything can happen to anybody at any time. And so once that shooketh me, and I was, literally on my ass for quite some time, that coupled with seeing other people who had it way worse. I always say I give so much credit to the year and a half I was in a warrior transition unit, going through my rehabilitation. And I always say what I went through sucked. It did. It wasn't fun. But when I would wheel up or hobble up to formation when I could, and I would see people that were coming back from theater, burn victims head to toe, missing arms and legs. It was a very humbling experience that Chase not only, you can do whatever you want in life to take care of yourself, but that's not always a given that's going to always be the given. And then there are always people who have it worse than you. And a lot of those guys and girls had way better attitudes than I did. So does that answer your question? It was kind of twofold there.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And, before we started recording, I shared with you that I listened to some of your podcasts on my drive up here. And I realized we're very aligned in terms of our mission. I think what you're doing is really important in helping people to be their best. And
thank you.
And I think part of the alignment is reaching people while they're still well, and before people really start to struggle.
Yes.
Yes. I don't know. We talk about the subclinical community of people who may not be willing to raise their hand or to take a knee. And specifically in our military community, especially in special operations, you don't want to let down your team.
Yeah.
And I see that for certain with our firefighters, our police officers, our public servants, even in the medical community, in the ERs. It's hard to acknowledge that you're struggling. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the population that we're so passionate about reaching out to. And you don't have to be in extremis to, go get one of these images, have these conversations, see where you're at. And so that has sort of led us down this road. I mentioned this conversation around human performance, how this technology has kind of pivoted a little bit. And our scientists and physicians and engineers started asking these questions of, if we lower the energy, if we stimulate a different way, how might we also be able to nudge these neurons in a different way? And so,
interesting.
Yeah, there's a new product that got innovated called the Sonal. And so that's personalization. If you take those 5 center words, Sonal, that's how the name of the product came about. And our goal here is to be able to bring a predicate into somebody's home. And so now truly, if our goal is to democratize brain health and to democratize brain care, the accessibility to this, we sort of perceived there was this market gap for people who really want to be their best. It can be a true human performance.
Everybody listening here, that's for damn sure.
Yeah, they may be crushing life and doing great things and want a competitive edge. This is something for them. But if speaking specifically to a lot of the elite athletes that we see, or even the elite operators, in their prime at 100%, they're sort of these top 1% or top 0.01% of the population. But if they take a hit or God forbid a life event happens, we've had people who have lost children who've fallen off their way, even if they're functioning at 70%, to all the world, they're still rock stars because they're so high performing to start out with. But they might internally know something is off and be looking for help. And that's a community I think that we're trying to reach, is these silent sufferers, subclinical populations. We don't want to wait until somebody's really struggling. And so that's certainly part of our mission. And rather than getting a full blown clinical grade tool, having to go see the doctor, now we have this wellness human performance device.
Amazing.
So yeah, we're excited about how
I can't wait to
evolved.
try it out myself too.
Yeah.
And going down in, I think next month, like I said. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll get a chance to see that and demo it. And
let's see how dumb Chase really is. Chase, you registered at a 1.
No, I am certain that is not the case.
Well, knowledge is power, and having people like you and organizations like Wave Neuro bring not only the science and the wearables and all of the cool tech to the forefront. I really love most of what you're doing. Like we're saying, kind of in alignment here with missions is just changing the narrative around what it means to be a high performer. I want to be a high performer every damn day. And I'm not a CEO. I'm not a professional athlete, but I am someone who cares about all components of my wellness, and I want them all firing as much as possible. And if not, I would like to know why, how I can get in there and fine tune things. And for me, that is a big kind of concept of what I say when I say live a life ever forward. It's bringing attention and awareness into these key areas of our life that can help us take a step, or to take the next step, or at least a step forward. So I always ask my guests, I'm curious, what does that mean to you when you hear those two words, ever forward? How do you live a life ever forward?
Wow, that's a great question. I think, and I guess I'm cheating a little bit because I heard your inaugural podcast where you talked about, this was one of the emblems and slogans for your military unit.
My father's actually, yeah.
Your father's
his first unit, yeah, the 116th Infantry Regiment.
Yeah. For me, I think a lot of it is not letting your past dictate your future. Mm. We all have the ability to reshape our future, move in any direction that we want to, and live big dreams. And my hope is that everyone can capture that spirit and live their best life. I think Ever4 it's a really elegant mantra because it's forward leaning, and for our organization, we really are about innovating and thinking about, dreaming about what might be perceived as impossible we'd like to achieve. I
can tell you one thing, a beautiful answer, by the way. I always say there's never a right or wrong answer. Your interpretation is personal, and I appreciate that. I think we're living in a time and age now where like your dreams quite literally not only could be, but should be your reality, because we have so many ways to make them a reality every day.
Absolutely.
Well, Erik, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.